Jonathan, you are working in one of the coolest companies. You are working at Amazon as the tech recruiter. You have 12 years of experience with tech recruiting. So I guess plenty of people will be really curious to know how you got to being a tech recruiter at Amazon. How did you learn the tech stuff, the IT terminology and everything that is needed to place IT candidates? So welcome on the podcast and tell us more about how you started your tech recruiting journey and got into Amazon.
Oh, great question too. And Michael, thank you so much for the opportunity to kind of connect with you today too. But for me, I got into recruiting kind of by accident. I went to school for communications marketing, and my first job out of school was working at a staffing agency called Allegis Global Solutions. And they put me on an RPO contract at Best Buy. And I sat right next to the recruiting team, and I would hear them on the phone calls all day long, talking and recruiting on tech related roles. So, software engineering roles, solution architect, system dev roles. And I just discovered, like, hey, maybe I would be well suited for this type of industry and role. And so I started in sourcing, and then eventually I started doing full cycle recruiting too. And I just fell into tech recruiting about 12 years ago now too. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So you at first worked in some other company, right? And then you got into Amazon, right?
Yeah, so I've jumped around. I worked RPO, and then I went over to agency staffing. And then eventually I found kind of my area where working internal talent acquisition teams was kind of the ideal fit for me too. So I've done them all, but
Mm,
I felt like internal TA is kind of my place to be because you get to build solid relationships with hiring managers,
mm.
and you're kind of their go-to person right at the bat too. So I've jumped around. Currently, yeah, I'm at Amazon. I've been there for about 5 years, and it's been a great experience too.
No, awesome, awesome. Well, we will discuss also the work, how to work with hiring managers. So how to do the intake calls and everything. But if we still pause a bit and if you could elaborate a bit more on what is it like to actually work at Amazon? I mean, there must be huge
Yeah.
competition. Everyone wants to work at Amazon, and not just as tech recruiters, but also these IT professionals, right? So what is it like? Like, can you just tell us, from your insider's point of view, like what is it like to work in such a huge company on so many roles with so many candidates?
Right. And for me, there's so much competition, right? There's so many internal teams, there's so many openings, there's so many recruiters, sourcers, internally to Amazon too. So it's all about, selling your team's roles when you are kind of sourcing externally too. And it's quite intimidating too. So it's just kind of learning the ropes, learning kind of your team, and then learning how to kind of sell your opportunities too, because you might not think of it, but when you are kind of recruiting against your other teams, working at a larger kind of company, internal talent acquisition company, there is a lot of internal competition in that way.
Internal, as in with other recruiters who work in your team or some other department?
Right. There's so many other teams, other departments, and you're kind of competing for the same tech talent when you think about it
Oh, I
too.
see. I see. Oh, that's interesting. Actually, I haven't thought about it before. That some developer applies to Amazon, and then two or three or five recruiters are competing and fighting for this one person. Is it the case?
Potentially, right? Oh, there's so many teams, and a lot of times there's so many openings, and the tech talent is pretty niche and pretty
Mhm.
specialized too. So there's just a certain amount of people that you can kind of reach out to and engage too. So it's quite competitive when you think about it that way.
That's interesting. And do you also do the outreach to prospective candidates somewhere on, say, LinkedIn or GitHub or Google?
I do, yes, and I really encourage people to, look at LinkedIn, but then also look at other communities, Reddit. There's so many other subs that you can kind of reach out to people on, or like you said, GitHub, GitLab, Stack Overflow. There's many online communities and forums where you can kind of source and engage people that way. And it's all about being creative and personalizing your messaging and your outreach too, because there's just so much competition in general
Mm.
for opportunities.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And you also mentioned that you need to sell those opportunities to candidates. So how do you do it? What are the aspects of the job or the opportunity that you usually highlight?
No, it's a great question. I would say first it's all about setting up an intake call with the hiring manager and asking them, what are your selling points? What is your team building? What's the project? Is there anything exciting about the project? Any selling points? Anything unique that you guys are doing? And then it's kind of taking that information and then applying it within your outreach messages like, hey, we're building this at this scale. It's cutting edge. We've got something over here that's exciting. I think it's helpful to kind of have that information too, because most job descriptions are pretty bland. They're pretty
Mm.
generic. So it's good to reach out to your hiring manager, get those additional selling points, and then use that in your outreach messages too.
And it's interesting that you mentioned this because I was just in touch with a group of recruiters from a staffing agency, and they don't have the visibility. They often cannot even speak with hiring managers. So they have these very generic JDs, job descriptions, like we are looking for a software engineer. You should know Python or Java, and you will be working on RESTful APIs. There is not much that they can do. And also then they kind of struggled to identify those points. And when we were discussing it, they were like, "Oh, but I mean, it's all pretty much the same. Now every company is using the cutting edge technologies, and it's startup anyway." So now I'm kind of thinking, in your case, for example, with so many different teams at Amazon, like all of them are working on cutting edge software solutions, or assume. So let's say most of them. They, the quality of the team members is really high compared to the other companies. So with this in mind, like how are you still able to come up with some interesting selling point if the bar is already so high?
It's such a good question too. Yeah, I feel like that's a difficult thing too. We're working at a tech fang company because every department's going to be exciting. All the projects are
Mhm.
exciting, and I think as
Exactly.
a source or recruiter, it's taking what you have and creating kind of that secret sauce. What can you say to kind of attract people and get them engaged? How could you hook them on your message? And yeah, that's quite difficult. I would say what I do like to do is I look at someone's profile and they've been doing this type of specialized skill, like Kotlin, Android, and they've created these apps. And it's quite similar to my project over here, what we're building. So for me, I kind of like to look at their profile, what they've been doing, and then relate it to the team or project, and then say, hey, you could build off or kind of grow in this area, which you've already kind of specialized in. So it's just finding something unique and something that's will pique their interest too, because um, yeah, that's kind of what I would do.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you can always find something, right? So that's very cool. And then once you have this aspect of the job, then you go to these Reddits, or you mentioned Stack Overflow, and then you promote those vacancies, right?
Yep, exactly. So there's so many different online communities, social media sites, Twitter, Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
of course, LinkedIn, but there's just so many places where you can kind of find people online too. And it's changed, right? Our industry has changed. When I first started, I would look for CVs or resumes, and I would use Boolean strings to kind of find that information. Now, 2023, it's more about finding people's profiles, their
Mm-hmm.
portfolios, their blogs. Maybe on Twitter, they've got some sort of hashtag they're using, or anything I can kind of find in them. I use that to my advantage and say, oh, you're in this industry, you're talking about this topic. Maybe this position would be kind of a good fit for you. So it's kind of shifted a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually a good point that instead of looking for the PDF files on Google, you could look for blog posts that someone wrote on the topic. Let's say, microservices with Java, or whatever, something more advanced, of course, something niche, and then you find the blog post, and then you send a message to the person, to the author, right?
Yes,
And
exactly. And it's really taking kind of a summary of what they're working on or what they wrote about, and then putting that in your message. And
Mhm.
then taking your selling points from your hiring manager, what they talked about with the project, and then kind of combining that and sending that out in an outreach message. And
Oh,
you're going to get a higher response rate. If you just
mhm.
take the time to kind of personalize your messaging, a lot of people just focus on mail merging to when they send the
Mhm.
same bland
Yeah.
vanilla email to 400 people,
Yeah.
you're not going to get a good response back.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe just from the B players and C players, but those A players would not respond to the message. That's
Exactly.
very, very interesting that you mentioned it. And now, I can imagine that people who are listening to this, they are like, "Oh my God, that sounds like so much work. How can I do it even? Like, how can I go to Reddit? Like, where do I find Reddit?" As they may wonder. So they can Google where Reddit is, but still, like, how much time does it even take you to go to Reddit and read those posts and respond and engage with people? How do you even organize your day?
That's such a good question too. And for me, I use a tool called Rescue My Time. And what it does is it tracks my search history. So every day I can see, okay, this week I worked and I sourced for this amount of time, and then it tells you the history of kind of what you've been doing
Mhm.
and where you're kind of investing your time. And in recruiting, there's so many distractions too. It's really hard, or really easy to get distracted. It's hard to remain focused on kind of your sourcing kind of time. So first off, I would say time blocking is so critical for your success. So using your Outlook calendar, your email calendar, and putting kind of an invite for yourself, like for the next hour, I'm just going to focus on these two recs, these two software engineering recs. I'm going to focus on them. And then it's kind of tracking your time course, but then also using like Excel or a CRM tool to kind of track, okay, here's all the people I messaged, here's the people that responded back to me. And it's kind of creating kind of a daily calendar or just daily tracker of
Mhm.
everyone you're in process with, everyone you called. And really the term that we use at Amazon is called working backwards. So you at the end of the day you get that hire, but what did you do to get that hire? So it's looking at all your data. So to get that one hire, I had to call 100 people, I had to screen 20 people, and I submitted 5 people, and that one person got the job. So it's looking at all that data and figuring out, okay, what's your average time to fill, and what's your response rates, and how long did it take to kind of start and end kind of your process. So
Mm, mm.
that's so vital too.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so you block your calendar, you use the tool Rescue My Time, right?
Yes.
So yeah, we will Google that. That sounds like a very vital tool indeed. Do you have any other suggestions for someone who may be kind of drowning in this kind of recruiting space? Let's say in a staffing agency, they may be under pressure to deliver and submit plenty of candidates, and the recruiter may not know what to do first. To do screening calls, or rather to send messages, or rather to screen candidates on the phone. So how to even prioritize the day? Like if you start the day, let's say tomorrow is Friday,
Mhm.
so how do you know what to do not to drown in all these tasks?
That's such a good question too. For me, it's all about pulling your data. So pull out your data, and maybe you've got an ATS system where you can kind of pull, last 90 days, and what were the types of roles that you filled, and how long did it take to get those recs filled too. So you can kind of look at that data and realize, okay, maybe I should prioritize my time in this way. If you've got 20, 30 recs to focus on, like these two full stack positions, looks like we're able to fill them within 2 to 3 weeks in the past. Maybe I should prioritize my time based on that. So then it's just kind of tracking your day to day. So how many people did you reach out today? You could set a goal. I want to reach out to 50 people today, and by the end of the week, I want to get at least 10 people on the phone, and then from that, my goal is to get 1 to 2 submittals. So it's just kind of breaking down. Okay, kind of your funnel, your sourcing funnel, and kind of your process. And I would say tracking the data is going to be very key and very important. Your recruiting metrics too. So then you can kind of almost like create kind of a picture and figure out your averages. So for me now, I know, okay, for this type of role and in this location, I know, hey, it's going to take at least 2 to 300 outreaches before I can get that one hire. So I know the averages, and hey, I need to at least talk to 10 people per week and get that 1 to 2 submittal on average per week. So it's just looking at the averages too is going to be very important.
Awesome, awesome. It's great that you have the data to look at. That's very cool and very helpful. Awesome. You also mentioned the cold outreach, or did you mean cold calling? Like, do you also, or maybe I could rephrase the question. Like, what do you think about cold calling? Like, do you pick up the phone and do you call to people?
That's such a good question too. I know for me at Amazon or just in tech, most people don't like to get a call like they used to. I would say I kind of follow this process. So what I do is I send them an in-mail message, I send them an email, and then my last resort is a call. So I kind of in-mail, email, call. And if I really want to find the person, yeah, call is kind of the last resort for
Mhm.
most people too. So making sure you're on the right time zone too, not calling in the morning. I would say call around the lunch hour too. That's a recommendation too. And most people, from my experience, Monday through Wednesday is a good time to kind of reach out and call too. So I've had success in that. It really depends on the types of roles in the industries too. If you're agency recruiting, I would say calling right away is probably your best bet because they're contractors, so they're probably used to getting more calls. If it's more internal talent acquisition, then you can kind of take your time a little bit more and focus on in-mail, email, and engagement that way too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, people these days don't like calls. I mean, they probably don't mind receiving them as much as making them. So people are like, "Oh my God, I'm so scared of calling." So we need to kind of overcome this fear of calling, and probably just sending the initial message via WhatsApp or email, as you mentioned, is a good idea, so that you kind of know the person expects the call and they are ready for that.
No, and I would also say that it's good to call and deal with that rejection as a recruiter because really you're just calling them. Hey, do you want to make more money and work at a cool
Mhm.
company? I mean, it's a positive message, and people most of the time are just going to say no, but thank you for your time. So it's not like you're going to get a really hard negative message back too. So that's something to kind of think about. So if you do have that fear of getting rejections, I would say do it.
Mhm.
Dive into it full scale, fail forward, as I say, and just do it. See what happens. Try it out for a week, and
Mhm.
kind of track your responses. Was it better when I emailed people? Or was it better when I called people? And
Yeah.
then, of course, use that data to your advantage.
Mhm. It's a great idea, by the way. What you just mentioned with regards to the message that you asked them, or the question, because it just reminded me. I also got a cold call from some company selling some stuff, and I'm, usually in the first 5 seconds, I'm like just already dropping the call. Like, no, I'm not interested. But they asked a similar question. They just asked, "Do you want more leads and make more money in your business?" And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? So they're like, well, we can bring you more leads and we can bring more sales, and like, okay, well, why would I say no to that? Okay, so it's just a question of what is their proposal, and how do we pay them? But just to find this one sentence that people just cannot say no to is super important. And what you just mentioned, um, how was it? Do you want to work in a cool company and earn more money? I mean, who would say no to that, right? So,
Right. Or hey, if you have an opportunity where you've got a fully remote job
Mhm.
too, there's many engineers that are still looking for that. Many companies now are requiring people to go back into
Yeah,
the office. So if you have a rec where it's like, hey, this is a fully virtual team, you're going to
mhm,
get so many people to just
yeah,
be like, yes,
yeah. Finally,
yes,
someone who is working at Amazon just in another division, right?
right.
Or that's prohibited, I guess. Can you poach people from another division?
No, we
No,
can't.
no, that would be awkward.
Yeah.
Awesome, cool. And you also worked in a staffing agency, right? You mentioned just a while ago. So you can compare the life of a recruiter inside a company, the internal corporate recruiter. And some recruiters kind of prefer the staffing agency world just because they can earn commissions and they, are incentivized by placing candidates. So I kind of assume you don't, make any commissions for internal placements. So what would you suggest to someone who is considering both options? They may wonder what to join, what kind of a company, staffing agency, or to be internal recruiters. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I would say it's probably good to start out at an agency too, because they have a lot of foundational things that you will learn too, and they've got really good, solid training programs to internal to agencies versus internal TA. That you might not have that, where you're just here you go, you got to jump in and full
Hmm.
dive into just sourcing and recruiting. So for me, I do appreciate it that I did start at an agency because they invest in you too, and they invest. For me, starting at an agency was ideal because they really invest in training, and kind of they give you a ramp up time too, and there's a lot of chances to work in so many different industries or jobs or skills. One day you might be working on a full stack role, the next day you're working on a solution architect role.
Yeah.
Versus internal talent acquisition teams, you might just focus on one particular area, and
Mm.
that might just be your main focus for the next couple months. So I would say starting at an agency is more ideal because they work quicker, faster. You're able to get quick wins right away, and you're able to
Mhm.
learn on the fly too.
Mm.
So, but it's a little different kind of process, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And the advantage of being in the talent acquisition internal team is the closeness to those hiring managers, right? And you mentioned the intake meetings or intake calls. So, what does it look like? What should people do in order to have a good, proper intake call with the hiring manager?
Oh yeah. So that's huge. So for internal talent acquisition, you get to build the relationships with hiring managers too. So the way I set up my call is I first do some research on the team. I pull some data on the type of role that they're looking to fill, and then I come to the table with that information. So if you're focusing on talent mapping, so pulling data, presenting that, here's the average time to fill, here's the types of competitors that we're facing, and here's the universities that we should target. So it's coming prepared with all that data, presenting that with the hiring manager, and then it's again asking them, okay, what are the selling points of the role? What are you looking for? What are the soft skills that you are looking for too? And if you are working at an agency, you're not going to get that opportunity to really grasp all that internal intel too. It's just, hey, we've got a mobile role, have at it. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 2 weeks to fill this versus internal talent acquisition. You know all the nitty gritty details, the selling points, and you really know kind of what they're looking for in relation to culture fit and soft skills too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's really great that you have the opportunity to speak with these hiring managers and get feedback once you submit some candidates, right? And you mentioned you submit like 4 or 5 candidates for each role for the hiring manager. Not too many, not too few. What's your secret number?
That's a tough one. It depends on the role too. Of course, it always just takes one, right, to get that hire. But
Mhm.
I would say it's good to give them a slate of candidates too. So maybe 5 to 10 different candidates at least, and having them kind of review their resumes, starting there to having them give you feedback and such on the resume. So okay, oh, this person is ideal, this person is not. So you're
Mhm.
kind of looking at the pros and cons of each resume. So then that really helps when you go back and start to source externally because of you have all that intel and you know kind of okay, this is what the hiring manager is really looking for too.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And then what would you suggest recruiters do? Do they or should they submit all these candidates at once? Let's say a batch of 4 or 5 candidates, get them reviewed, and then submit another batch of 4 or 5? Or do you like to just take it step by step? As candidates come in, you submit one. 3 or 4 days may pass, and then you submit a second one. What do you prefer? What do your hiring managers like more?
Yeah, it really depends on the role, but for me, I do like to, at least get a few in the pipeline. So maybe 3 to 5, have them review the resumes, the backgrounds, and then from there, give the go ahead to move to kind of a phone screening interview round, and then just kind of progress from there. So I would say
Mhm.
at least 3 to 5. Start there, see how they respond, and keep kind of progressing from that point.
Mhm.
I would recommend like 10 to 20. Here's
Mhm.
like all these people, review everyone, just because it just will slow you down, and you won't get a response back from the HM too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it would be a good problem for some recruiters to have, to have 10, 20 candidates. They are, especially in the staffing world, they are like, oh, we have one, so we already have someone.
Yeah,
But of course, it
right.
depends on, yeah, it depends on the complexity of the requirement. There are some easier roles to fill, like a front-end developer, right? Which kind of brings me to the next question. Like, what if you have too many candidates? And by too many, I can imagine you get hundreds and hundreds of candidates for some of these rather um, straightforward roles, like front end React developer. So how do you even review these hundreds or thousands of candidates that land on your desk, if that happens?
Yeah. Oh, that I would say looking at the preferred and then required skill sets, that's a huge indicator. Okay. Like at least minimum of 3 to 5 years of experience. So really it's just assessing, are they in a location? Do they have the skill sets that we're looking for in relation to those basic requirements of
Mhm.
kind of that band too. And then, yeah, it's just kind of looking at their resume and just kind of assessing their background, their skills. If they do look good, I would say setting up kind of a phone screen with them and talking over the position and talking over the selling points. That's all going to be very important too. So really, that's the job of a sourcer is just kind of screening out uh,
Mhm.
uh, individuals based on those basic requirements of the role too. So it's you might get hundreds of people to apply, but then if you look at the requirements, maybe 1 or 2 are going to be
Mhm.
qualified, unfortunately. So it's a lot of that. It's time consuming, and it takes time to kind of screen and review resumes too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and still, that's the better problem to have, right? If you have too many, then you at least know that you have at least 1 or 2 or 5 who are good ones. The worst problem is if you have zero and you are looking for some C# developer with some very specific skill set and on-site work, and there are only 2 people. Oh,
Oh
and they
yeah,
have a
I've been
good
there.
job. Awesome, awesome. Cool. So people may also wonder what's next for someone like you. You have 12 years of experience with tech recruiting. You've been working in one of the coolest companies, and not just in the United States, but around the world. So, if someone just picks up the phone and calls like, "Hey, Jonathan, would you like to, what was it, work in a cool company and earn more?" Then you say like, "No, I'm earning more and I'm working in a cool company." So you would like, drop the call. So, what's next for someone who has been there, done that? What can people kind of see as the next step of someone who has so much experience?
Oh yeah, good point. I would say it's being on a good team. So looking at your team, if you're on a team and you feel like, hey, I know a ton of stuff, and I'm there's no one else I can learn from, then it's probably time to kind of move on and look at it, exploring opportunities. But if you're in a room and you're like, wow, I'm next to really some smart people, some smart engineers, recruiters, and I'm still learning and I'm still challenging myself in this particular team, then it makes sense to stay and
Mhm.
continue to kind of grow and learn. And that's what I do like about my team is there's so many people that have more experience than me, and I get to kind of learn from them and grow from them too. So that's a key thing, looking at your company, or if you're working at an agency, if you are like the top producer and there's no one else to kind of learn from, maybe it is time to kind of move on and look at something else too.
Well, that could be a good sales message at the end, right? So, because
Yeah.
usually during the workshops with recruiters, we look at how to pitch an opportunity to someone, and it's always kind of interesting to see that people who have a dream job for someone, like we were just looking at some CTO, who was managing 2,000 people, and he, when we were on a call with him, he's like, "Oh, I'm kind of tired of this, huge company. I just want to join a smaller company." But for plenty of other IT managers and CTOs, his role is the kind of a dream job to have, right? But once you are in the role for 2 3 years, you want to leave the role and shift to something else. So it's kind of refreshing to see that even someone in kind of your position, which plenty of people just look up to and think like, "Oh my god, I want to be in the role." You may be in 2 3 years thinking, "Okay, what's next?" And in recruiting, we just kind of need to work with this and use these messages to candidates to get their attention.
Yeah, and I would also say, if you're still staying humble, right? You're learning, and you're like, wow, I got to meet with this other recruiter, and I'm just so humbled by their experience, and I'm
Mhm.
learning so much from them, and having that is something that I always experience too on my teams. There's so many people, because it is such a large organization, that you're able to grow and learn from and excel at too. So yeah.
Hmm. Awesome. And now these days, also the AI is growing, and it's pretty much everywhere, right? It's getting into pretty much every aspect of our jobs. So, what's your take on using AI in recruiting? Like, do you use it? How do you use it? What would you suggest other recruiters?
Right. Yeah, I think some companies are afraid to use generative AI. They don't know kind of, they're learning kind of like the benefits of it, but there also is some security compliance issues with it. So I would say if your team does use it, make sure that you don't put any sort of confidential information within kind of a prompt, because it is open source too. So
Mm.
whatever you put into ChatGPT or Bard or Claude, it's out there publicly. So thinking of it that way, just make sure not to share anything that's confidential. But for me, you could use it for generating outreach messages. Hey, personalize an outreach message for this type of individual, an iOS engineer, and sell them on these benefits. And
Mm.
I've been able to kind of use it for outreach messaging, and people love it. I've gotten really good feedback, and my
Mhm.
response rates have increased too. So
Nice.
it's great. I feel like it's the future of our industry, and it will continue to kind of evolve too. And as recruiters, some recruiters are kind of afraid of it, but I would say experiment with it, test it out, and just recognize the benefits of it too.
Awesome, wonderful, cool. So, I mean, we could go deeper in all of these aspects with your experience. We could speak for another 2 3 hours, but I also want to be mindful about the time. And you may have some hiring managers calling you on Slack or somewhere.
Yes, I do.
So, so what would be your final advice to people who are in tech recruiting and they wonder, hey, how can I maximize the opportunities? How can I get more money? How can I get more commissions? How can I get more candidates placed? What would be your kind of insight?
I would say keep learning. So listening into podcasts like Michael's podcast here, it's fantastic. So I would say keep learning, keep growing. Take the time to invest in yourself too. So whether it's reading books, podcasts, or on social media, just kind of reading trends in the industry, all those things will be very important for your long-term success. So don't stop, keep learning, keep growing, and fail forward too.
Oh, that's a good one. And they can also learn from your blog, right? They can read the blog
Yes.
that you publish. So where can people find the blog and a bit more about you?
Wizardsourcer.com.
Wizardsorcerer.com. Okay, I'll include the link in the show notes and also the link to your LinkedIn profile so people can connect with you. Awesome. Cool. Wonderful. Thanks a lot for sharing all these tips and insights from working in one of the coolest tech companies. It's been very inspiring for me, and I guess lots of other people who will be listening to this podcast and watching it on YouTube.
Thanks, Michael.
Cool. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.